Run.
And I started with, the camera with the big flash on it.
Uh-huh.
That's when I started with. And I started at the Journal World here when I was in high school, Florence High School. And then I guess when I went a year at KU, 2 semesters, and but I already had a job at the Lawrence paper, and I just loved it. And I mean, it was like, this is it. And I was really fortunate to find something that I liked at that age and not dilly-dally. I have a grandson at KU, speaking of dilly-dally. And, but that I could just get right on it and was working for a guy who was a real son of a bitch, but he was really good. And I mean, I was fortunate all the way around, but paid the price dealing with the jerks. But, and then just, I went from, if you're interested, I worked at the Journal World as a staffer, and I wrote and shot. And then I went to Topeka Capital Journal for twice the money, and it was then considered a much bigger paper, and had a really good staff, and the photo staff was like one of the top 10 in the country as far as what we put in the papers. And then I went to the Wilmington News Journal in Delaware, and they called one day. And then I went to United Press International in Vietnam for 2 years during the Vietnam War. And then back to Chicago for UPI, and then the National Geographic for a few years, and then the Washington Post for 21 years. Then back to Lawrence to run the newsroom at the Journal World for 20 years. Well, not 20. I've been back here 20 years, and I was there for 15. Something like that.
Oh, wow.
That's really cool. So you're pretty much doing like what you love, like for your whole career.
I was talking to a geologist who wrote a book that was like required reading because I'm going to see this guy several times, and anyway, I'm reading it, I'm trudging, and it's but he loves geology, and he went to KU, and he's been the state geologist in different states, and I've got a book that I did before a show, and after he looked at it, he said you've never had a job either, huh? Because it's a job, and you think, well, I got to go to work, but you did it for nothing at the beginning. I mean, nothing, and but I didn't care. I really didn't, and I was from a poor family, so I should have said, God, I'm gonna get me. My sister took another trail, and I gotta get some money and buy things. But she was one of the brains of the family. But anyway, it was just a wonderful. I mean, I can't tell you, but I'll try. But it's what I didn't plan on, and plans. It's like good luck with your plans because it just. Something comes up, and it sounds corny, but it's what you hear. What I heard, it's an old saying about it's not the destination, it's the journey. And it's if I hadn't worked on a paper, if I hadn't started on a paper this size, and it was a good one, it was considered very, way above average of a paper that size, and that's it. It was, and. Because they always had more staffers and more the comparable papers, and but if I hadn't had that exposure, and if I hadn't had the exposure of carrying around it, when you went out, didn't do it much here, but in Topeka we'd go out to a tornado in Wichita or big explosion or something out in western Kansas. And we'd have to carry a transmitter with us that weighed 80 pounds. And you had to take a telephone apart to get it to work. And, and again, that was before direct dialing and all that. So you had to get an operator and say, please don't don't come in on this line, because one little click and it's shot to hell. And you'd hear him come on because he had a speaker on this thing. Are you finished with your call? Because all they could hear is these beeps. But anyway, just all that stuff that gave you an appreciation for something that was like, whoa, this is slick. Or, like you start out here, and I was responsible for having a page one picture every day. It'd be, a kid smelling a flower or something, or it might be something a little deeper. And but it was like, okay, just have the picture. Sometimes there'd be an idea from someone else, but it usually was mine. And you're always thinking about that, after you got the one for today, and it was an afternoon paper, so you had to have it by, say, 9:30 at the latest. And then you'd start thinking about tomorrow, but in the meantime, you had assignments that society would cover, like a tea, for some woman who was retiring, and get a group shot, because with those cameras, you had 2 pieces of film, and they cost 20-some cents a sheet, and the publisher here was very conservative, I would say, although he had a lot of money. You'd take 2 pictures, so that's like with your point and shoot, you go say, I really want this one, and then but you really thought about what the hell you were going to do this with, and you didn't just frivolously, just shoot a snapshot of something. So that was very good training. And as far as successful, one of the things, I worked for my mentor for 9 years here and in Topeka. And then I got some phone calls from different places. But the only way when you're a writer or a photographer, the way that most people see is by what you do. And if they say, boy, this person can write, I'm going to be looking for their stories. And in here, and I think, no, in Topeka, but in Topeka, your name was on every picture. Here, it was like if they thought you'd extended yourself above and beyond, they'd put your name on. And that could have been your decision one day and your decision the next day, and there was no equality there. And I wanted my name on. I grew up here, and I'd run into people on the street and say, "Hey, I saw you had a picture in the Journal World." And, yes, I'm sure. It was amazing. And I felt that way when I had a story in the Washington Post. When someone would say, "Hey, that was a hell of a story," and or pictures or whatever it was. But in the jobs I had, including the last one at the Journal World, I never applied for a job. And one of the things my mentor impressed upon me was you never let anyone see bad work or mediocre work. Because someone, let's say you're working at the Journal World, and the editor of the Des Moines Tribune, or the Los Angeles Times, or the Albuquerque Journal, or whatever it happens to be, and here it's likely to happen because of KU, that they're in town, their daughter goes to school here, and they pick up the paper and see a piece of crap with your name on it. Go, Jesus Christ. And that believe me, that will be their opinion. Period. And there's something about humans that we always remember. Didn't she screw up a story on something, didn't she? And case in point, when I was at the Post, we were doing a thing where we had a team of reporters and me, and I was shooting the pictures for it. And we were in San Jose and Salt Lake, I think, and Washington, of course, and Chicago, to do, like, it was about something that was going on in the world, and it was like, what are in the United States, and it was like, what do these people think? What do these people think? And we were at the Post in a meeting room, and the executive editor, who had no patience, Ben Bradley, he was the guy who created Watergate and the Pentagon Papers, and just incredible. And I got to work for this guy, and that was like, I learned more. I mean, you wouldn't believe what it's like to work for a guy or male, female, anything, that is, probably the best at what they do. And running the Washington Post in the heyday was the best. And we were kicking the New York Times ass regularly. And that's what it's all about. If there is no passion for kicking someone's ass, don't do this. Because that's all I ever wanted to do. Really. I mean, I don't know how I got it. It's probably being poor, maybe. But I wasn't standing around out in front of a courthouse in Washington, D.C., waiting for somebody to come out with 15 photographers standing there to get a picture. I want to get the best picture that anybody's going to get out of this. And they call it assholes and elbows photography. Because when, you're just jolly assing around, and then the guy comes to the door, all bets are off, pushing, shoving. And, but, I wanted to get there first. I wanted to get the best when I was there, and I wanted to get back, because you have to get this stuff back. And now, with laptops, you can get it back from your car. And, but however you do it, you got to get it back. Because otherwise, you can have the best of anything if nobody sees it. But anyway, this thing we're talking about, covering this piece in 4 different cities, and the executive editor says, all he ever wanted to know is the bottom line. I don't want to listen to all this crap. Who's going to run this show? And the managing editor said, well, I think I'm going to put so-and-so on this. And he said, isn't he the guy who fucked up that piece, on something? And the managing editor says, Ben, that was 8 years ago. I said, who else you got? I mean, and that sticks. That sticks to you. And there is nothing. I mean, you'll be okay in someone's eyes if you come in with really something good, or come up with something good, or have something good, or do something good. For that day, it's like, hey, good job. But you'll always be remembered by that thing that you did 8 years ago. And when I was at the Geographic, it had these enormous light tables. Well, just about the size of the top of this table. And I'd have, say, 50 slides here that were the selects, the finals, and then others scattered around at you, and then boxes and boxes from this one take. And this is when I was a picture editor there, and an editor who was running the magazine would come in and say, "How's that story coming on such and such?" And say, "Well, there's the guy right here. I think he did a hell of a job, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Oh, yeah. And who are these over here?" And I said, "Oh, those are the outtakes." And I learned, you don't leave those things around. You cover them up, because you start looking at it be something that's not very good. I mean, it's okay, but it isn't up to standards. Oh, this is a lousy picture of this church. I said, well, it'll never see the light of day. And, 1/4 of these pictures will get published anyway out of this bunch. I said, I told him about it. I said, it's not an important picture, but if he goes back, or if he's got some time, shoot it again. And with some ideas. Not just say, I don't like this, whether you're dealing with stories or pictures. You can't say, although you'll hear it from other people, I don't like this. I want a better one or a better story. And they won't say why they don't like it. And so you figure that out. And that's the learning curve. And you can't read their minds, but you know in your heart you've got to get something better than this. And quickly. Because it's, But anyway, I'd be in a meeting with the editor of the Geographic and all the other department heads looking at the when you can tell a guy to come home. It used to be at the Geographic when they were traveling all over every place. Not so much anymore. But it's, so if you're going to tell a guy to come back from Africa, because of plane fares and all that, and you're not going to say, whoops, we need one more, so if you can go back, and then you got a problem. So that's, your credibility rests on that. And so you're showing these things, projecting them. And, and the editors say, oh, that's a nice set of pictures. It's good. And then this editor who saw that other shit is in there. They say, well, he didn't get anything on the church. And so what I would try and do is just embarrass the shit out of them so they wouldn't do that again. Because that's not fair. If you got a problem, come to me and tell me about it, not when we're trying to do a show and tell here and impress everybody with what a hell of a job we did. And I said, well, and I thought he might do that, but he just always to be prepared. And I said, one of your writers suggested that church, and it turns out that it's not even going to be in the story. And he did go back, and he got a hell of a picture. But since it's not going to be in the story, I don't have a picture of it in here. But it's a good one. But that's how the mouses running around your office, who don't really say, much of anything, and rarely have an opinion. They're always asking you what you think. Hey, what do you think of this? And you notice, I do, if they've asked everybody in the building what they think of something. And it carries nothing. But those are the people who will come sniping at you in a meeting. Because they figure they just showed you what they're working on that you haven't gotten yet. And so let's see what you've got. No way. Because you never, ever, rule number 728. When you've got something that, and the most important thing about my job and what I feel that I did better than a lot of people, and because there are a lot of things I didn't do as well as other people, but was to have ideas. And that is everything. Because, you're never, I shouldn't say never, but you're rarely going to get good material from an assignment. I mean, you're going to get, you're going to do the best that you can. But it's going to be something that it was your idea, and let's say you're working Tuesday through Saturday, and you go out on your day off and work on it. And if you're writing a story, you do the interview, and somehow, whether you do it or somebody else does, you get some pictures of the situation, and you haven't said it, you haven't suggested it to anyone, your boss, no one. Nobody knows you're doing it, and you do not tell any of your friends where you work. They may have seen you out doing something and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I just screw around." Because it's amazing how it works. Like when they see your worst stuff, but if somebody knows that I'm doing a story out at Pimlico racetrack, and I'm doing they call it the back track or back of the track, got a lot of names, but where all the jockeys, assistants hang out. Jockeys make a lot of money, and the good ones, you never see them back there, but except to pick up their horse. But they have boxing back there with no gloves, and a lot of drinking, a lot of carrying on, and it's just a little town in itself, and they're the hot shots, and they're some grooms. It could be a groom, or it could be a guy who shovels shit out of the stall. I mean, it's just whoever wants to take over this town. But anyway, so if somebody hears that, when you show them your set of pictures and your story, you want to surprise them. You want to, whoever you show it to, you want it to be a surprise, because that has a value. And you don't want to say, "Oh, is this the back lot of the racetrack that you've been working on?" So right now it's an old story. It's just become an old story. It's not new. It's not, hey, that some editor's going to run all over the newsroom and say, "Look at this stuff." And but and it's a hard thing to do because you're so excited about it that you think, "Ah, God, I got this great idea. It's never been done," that and everything's been done. But it has, and you don't go up to somebody, and this is you'll do it anyway, but you don't go up to somebody and say, and like the editor or whoever's in charge of you, and say, "I've been thinking, there's a guy out here that collects windmills," or whatever it may be, because they're not all going to be, a great story, but if it's got people in it, you can make it a good story. And there's one thing I know for sure, is that people like stories about people. You'd never know it by the current journal world. It just doesn't have any people in there. But they don't want stories and pictures of things. They want them of people, because anything that a reader can identify with. And it's like everybody's been to kindergarten or first grade, so if you can do a story on a first grade teacher that has no arms and legs. No, you don't want to get into that. The gimp of the week, as they call it. But anyway, if you got an angle on it, and that's something that people can identify with. But when you go to your boss and say, "Hey, there's this woman I want to do a story on," and they buy it, and they say, "Oh, yeah, that sounds great. When can you do it?" I say, "Oh, whenever I have the time." Well, that means you're going to be taken out of the daily rotation that they're counting on, that I got 8 people working today or whatever. So it's an inconvenience to them. And you're selling, as they say in the business, blue sky. You don't have shit, but you got this idea that you hope is going to work out. And then you go, and she lives 100 miles from here. So you get in your car, you go down there. Well, she's got pneumonia and is in the hospital. And, she can't do it. And you don't have a story. You don't have anything, but you've got, I don't know what you get a mile now for driving a car, but 50 cents a mile. And your day of producing nothing So you just cost the company, and a lot of bean counters look at it that way. Say, well, shit, well, if it involves a plane ticket to Chicago or New York from here, and it's really ordinary, that you were probably more excited about going to New York than you were doing the story. That happens a lot. And you don't have anything, well, there's another reputation you get in a hurry. And that's why, if you have it, and you've done a version of it that you've written, and it's on your own nickel, on your own time, because and when you've got something that you did that was your idea, that you produced, and I used to put the Washington Post, because that's the best place I've ever worked. And you drop that thing on the floor and look at it like this, and you think, that would not be there if it wasn't for me. And it's on the front page. Yes, and that's the way it goes. And if you don't feel like that, it's a lousy business to be in. And people can tell in about an hour and a half if you're really serious about this stuff. And if they come in on a Sunday afternoon because the editor, because he forgot something, and you're sitting over there doing something at your desk, and they'll come over and say, "What are you doing in here? It's your day off." "Yeah, but I just wanted to finish this thing up. I'm working on it." And you can't see it because I want to surprise you. And you do that, and they'll respect that. And so it's no people. I've heard, and it's a nice thing to have heard. A lot of times in my life, it's, "Well, how did you get that assignment?" I said, "Well, it was my idea." "Well, shit." It's like, that's cheating. Because you'll find there are a whole lot of people who never do that. Never. They'll say, "You know what would be a good story?" "What's that?" "Poverty. I think poverty would be good." "Any particular place or a bunch of people or what stage or?" "No, we can find some people in poverty." Yeah, that's an upper, but then there are upper stories in poverty. Somebody who's fought through the system and who's doing well. But that's a lot of people's ideas of it. It's a geographic. I was on the story idea committee, and someone would say, "How about Paris?" And this happened, I remember. And the guy who was running the meeting said, "Well, what about Paris?" And he said, "Well, we haven't done it in a while, because I used to have there's like a dictionary, and there's a name for it, but I can't remember. But it's got listings of every story the Geographic's ever done. So they went through there and saw that Paris was last done in 1965 or something, and so it's time for. And sometimes they give it some credence and sit there and say, "Yeah, it might be." And it's like, good God, that's a lame. But, and there again, you don't, you want to have ideas that are pertinent, that or that not, that you can tie into something, whether it's the economy today or jobs or whatever it may be. But just something that's viable, not just butterfly collecting. Although if somebody's got 18,000 specimens of butter, all over the ceilings and walls, that'll do it. But it's got to have something. And so I noticed the first, and I didn't know what to expect or what I was expected to come up with in these meetings. The first one, I didn't open, I opened my mouth and, made some, just to let people know I was there. I wanted to see how it went, and then I realized that everybody in there, because there might be a chance that you'd get to go to where the story was happening. It was going to be shot and written about. And so they pick exotic places, an island or whatever in the Pacific. And the editor had said, I'd heard him in a meeting, or we were having a conversation or something, but he said, we've got to have more United States stories. We've got to have, I want to have them with some regularity so people can expect to see something and not just another city story, which they did a bunch of. And so I didn't suggest anything that wasn't inside the United States. And I did the two that I suggested that went through. One of them was voted by the readers as the story of the year, and the other one came in like third. And I ran the stories, and we got them done in a hurry, and the editor loved them. And it was, and to me that wasn't rocket science, but you've got to look at, like, okay, I've heard all these ideas. Do I want to say Portugal, or some place that no one's ever heard of? It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen one, but there are some kids who have no immune system, so they live in like a plastic bubble, or if it's a baby, their crib and everything, and this is all fluffy, but it's inside this where they can't have any germs around. Well, there are a lot of people who just think that's hot stuff, and it is. I mean, it's unusual. If you were the first one to ever do a story on that, that would just whang. But it's like, what is, okay, that's hot, that's been done, and how many people in where you live, 1 mile radius, live in a bubble that you can see and say, oh yeah, I know, I mean, that's tough, and I had to live in a bubble once, but no one has had that experience. So it's an oddity and not something that you can identify with, that you've been there or you've done that. And what I found my second time around at the Journal World is cancer. Everybody knows somebody who has it or has had it, or in your family, in somebody's family, and it's one of those things that, the lady across the street isn't going to come running over here and saying, I've got cancer, and so that everybody knows it, and it's how people move through cancer. That, I mean, I ended up doing it. I could do 1 week if I wanted to, and it would get read, and what gets read because you get a lot of feedback, and what doesn't get read because you don't hear beans. But anyway, but it's something, a common experience that someone can identify with, and that's a biggie. And it's like, if you work on the Kansan, so you get a Lithuanian student, who's taking business. He's going to get a advanced degree in business. I don't know anybody Lithuanian, and I've been close to Lithuania, but anyway, it's so what? And if he's the only exchange student here, but there are an enormous amount of Chinese here and other Oriental types. I went in Walmart one night. I'd been doing something, and it was like midnight, and I'd forgotten to pick up something, so Walmart's open all night. So I came by there. If there was one Asian student in there, there were 100 doing their grocery shopping. And it was like a bus had just pulled up outside, and I thought, and there are things that they do better than we do. And one is watching your nickels and dimes in some cases. In some cases, they're worse than they are. But, that's not something you see every day in Lawrence, Kansas. And they were in little groups, and some were, in couples, but it was like, wow, in Lawrence, Kansas, we've got a Walmart full of Asian students. And they had the place to themselves, basically. And it's like everybody at KU eats. And when I was teaching a class up there, in writing, reporting, one or something, and I said, for your first story, I want you to write down in an interesting way what you ate this week, and what about, where'd you get it? But so you could say, on Monday, after my 3:00 biology class, I realized I hadn't eaten today. And I had $1.87 in my pocket and a bad credit card. So it's like, what do I do? And then, what did you do? And everybody up there can identify with that, who doesn't live in a fraternity, sorority, who goes to the house for lunch and whatever. But it's personal, and everybody up there eats. So you're going to look at that, whether you read the whole damn thing or not. But if it's your job to make it interesting, and not listen to you what you ate that week. It's how, why, and after my third beer, and I was having a tough time. I realized the reason is that I haven't eaten. So I had a infrared oven ham and cheese, anyway. But if you that, if you can start thinking that way, I don't know what you guys want to do when you grow up. Maybe you're going to be pharmacists or something. But if you are, it all applies. I mean, it really does. Having an idea. My mantra that I did a thing at the Rotary Club, and it's the old Rotary Club of hired businessmen and such, who I know, and I thought, and I was right, but I mean, just the way things are today, that when businessmen used to go out to hire people or newspaper publishers or whatever business you're in, they want, they'd say, well, the term used to be fire. This guy's got fire in the back. He's ready to go. He wants to go. She wants to go. And it's like when I talk to students, and the last time I talked was at the design school. And it's like, well, yeah, but I think in my first job, I'd like to shoot fashion for someone like Vogue. No shit. Who wouldn't? What? Let me see your pictures. What have you done that would qualify you to? And it would never, God, won't happen. What else would you like to do? Maybe you get a job helping a photographer at Vogue. But even that would be a tough one to do. How about helping a photographer in the world? And do you pay your dues or what? But by the way, what do you want to do? Yeah?
Right now I'm going into like advertising and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to be like an international journalist, but still like have.
Well, that's another favorite. And that's, I didn't really do, I think I was 50. I guess I was in my 40s when I first started traveling overseas. Because, you got to prove yourself here first. And you got to prove yourself that you can handle it. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that when you go internationally and you're alone, you don't have anybody to, you can send emails and things like that, but you don't have, your favorite person who bounce ideas off of isn't there, and it's lonely, and you don't speak the language, and or I never did, but you can get by. But it's really, that's what separates people who can function over there. That if you're like in a bureau for the New York Times, or if you're a one-man bureau, you hire a local person who's worked for a paper, and then they'll read, they say, here's a good story, and Lithuanian, that I'll translate for you, that you can copy and tell them it was yours, which a lot of them do. They don't copy it, but they go ahead there, but they, it's interesting in that the first thing when somebody is, say, on the national desk at the Washington Post, and a foreign assignment comes up that someone decides that it should be for this person, is that if they're going to Russia, they'll send them to Berlin class in Russian, and they'll be, I gotta go on a Russian class, or I'm going to one in Russia. And the first thing you do is hire an interpreter, who goes everywhere with them and does their interviews for them, and asks the questions in Russian and then repeats them in English. And that's the way that goes. How about you?
I actually want to be a photographer. I'm into sports photography right now. But yeah, any kind of photography really. I enjoy it. Been doing it for a little while now. So
that's good.
Started with 4-H.
Did you win a ribbon?
I did. I won a couple.
I've judged the 4-H contest. Well, it's, everybody talks about how hard it is to find a job, and I don't know how hard it is to find a job today. I mean, I've asked for any. But, it's all based on what you do and what you've done, and the potential that you might have. And it's all, so much of it is an attitude. The attitude that you have that someone interprets as promising. And but it's, whether you're doing in an advertising, which is, there's more pressure on advertising today than there ever was, because it's, it's like, God, we need more ads. And do you see Wired magazine? Anyway, it's all about, the miracle of the web, and from all different kinds of aspects. But it just only started the story, but in this latest issue. But it's like how banner ads were introduced, like there's an ad on say the New York Times or whatever, on the Journal World's website, and here's the thing up here, and it says, if you really want to know how to get around the world in 28 seconds, and there's a place to click, and it says AT&T, and da-da-da-da-da. And those are called banner ads. And it was like, and that was banner ads. And unfortunately, and they were, it fizzled out, because we know what happens when you click on an ad. You can never get to where you wanted to go in the first place. So you don't do that anymore. So what do you do? So that's as far as I got. But it's, and I'm not, I've never worked in it, but I always worked when I was on a publication. I always worked with advertising, because I wanted where I worked to sell as many ads as they could, You know, I want them to be so successful they can't stand it. But and instead of saying, nope, there's a fine line between the editorial department and you know, bullshit. And it used to be that used, and it was there was for years there was a thing going back and forth about how you should never have a strip ad at the bottom of the front page of your publication. Well, who doesn't do that today? I mean, every publication you see, every newspaper, and I don't hear anybody saying, hey, what are all these? Hey, there's a war going on. We've got time here. But a lot of that bullshit has gone to the wayside because they're not the fat cats anymore. And because the newspaper used to dictate who was the governor and who, you know, they would pick a ballot for you, and that's how you vote. You know, if you were a good Republican or a good Democrat. And the publishers, when I was, you know, in Harding and all this stuff, like in Kansas, this publisher, the father of the guy who's the current publisher, and the guy who owned the Topeka papers plus half a dozen other papers, Oscar Stauffer, and he owned TV stations, a gazillionaire, and the guy who ran the Harris chain, the Salina, Hutchinson, Ottawa, two others, literally get together, have a meeting, and they called them kingmakers. And not the meetings, that's what they called the group. And it wasn't, you know, common knowledge, but they would sit around and say, well, okay, who do we want for the governor this time? And they weren't shit. I mean, they were going to pick them. And, or so-and-so's getting too big for his brain there again. Nah. So they'd start writing editorials about the ineptness of the current governor. You know, and coming from all sides. You know, it's like, God, you know, what did we do? And what didn't we do? We weren't patronizing enough. And so they'd have a new guy in there. And it was amazing. You know, today it's like the Koch brothers in Wichita and some other people who are, I don't know, they're as bad as the United States in picking sides. And we always pick some dictator to throw in there, and he's the wrong guy, and we have to have him killed, and we put another dictator in someplace. But so now all the old rules are gone, and it's probably an opportunity for you guys because you can. The thing that's happened in photography is, you know, is this thing and point and shoots. No, that's good. You know, and unless someone really cares about photography and how they look, and because it really creates, you know, how your product is. I mean, that's the first thing you look at, like it or not. You pick up a paper, and if it's awful. And, you know, you have to be, it's a hard thing to do, but you have to do the best you can every time you take a picture that you're going to give to someone, hopefully that'll be published. Because the day that they'll say, we need a headshot of Joe Blow. So you go over and there's Joe Blow and you're not really excited about it. So you stand him up and bang and come back and it could be a situation where that's the only story that they have that's worth a damn for tomorrow's paper. And they'll say, so you say, here's your headshot. No, it's not a headshot anymore. It's gonna be on page 1. And it's like, oh shit. Hello, Joe. Wonder if I could come back. And a lot of times you've turned it in to the desk and go home for the day, and it isn't decided until 8 o'clock at night when they're putting the paper together that, gee whiz, it's going to be our lead story tomorrow. And there is this god-awful thing that you took, and hopefully it has your name on it, because then you decide, I'm never going to do that again. Plus, you people, whether it's a story or a picture, uh, you know, you want, if you don't make it look as good as you can, you look bad. And a lot of people don't get that. Well, he was really fat. I mean really fat. So I took a picture of him from head to toe, and what am I going to do? He's fat. Well, yeah, there is something you can do. First of all, you get him sitting down behind a table, or whatever it may be, or in his car looking out the window, or whatever, but do something, because it's your responsibility to make this person look good, because someday you're going to run into him at the Dillon's, and you're going to have to run down 2 aisles to get away from him before he sees you. And that's, you want people to say, because the first thing that anybody, when we reporter, they'll say, I don't know why you're doing a story on me. I've never done anything, and I'm just, and so you have to, and everybody is worth the story, and there's something in there, but you're not doing a story on them to make them look bad, and then the first thing a photographer hears is, God, I take terrible pictures. Just, I've never, and I got, so I would say, well, I've never taken your picture before, and I really, my job is not only to take a picture, but it's to make you look good in a picture. And if I don't make you look good, I look bad, and I don't want to look bad. So let's get on with this and get it. First thing, could you please put on a lighter top, like if you're at their house. And then they think, this guy's really into it. I mean, he's trying already, and at first you say, that's really a nice style. I really like that. But if you had something lighter, it would, blah, 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 whatever. Or if you wanted it darker. But you're doing it you're doing it because what they have on, is just not rational at all. And, or maybe they've got a neck like this, and so you say, it's got something there. And whatever, but that's all part of the deal. And what you do and what kind of job you do, but unless you're working for the National Enquirer that I interviewed with once, they asked me to come down to Florida, and all the helicopters you wanted, and anything it would take to get to get pictures of a wedding that's closed, and if it's on an island, get in your helicopter and out the window. But I went down there because I wanted to see the inside of it, and but anyway, is there anything you'd like to know? Except me just talking.
Well, I guess kind of getting more on the technical side. What kind of camera do you use now whenever you shoot photography?
I use digital, and have for a long time.
Is it like a Canon or Nikon?
Nikon. I've guns from Nikon was the first camera to come out with a single lens reflex that you could actually see through the lens, and that was a huge deal, and that was way back in the '60s, and body was like 100 and but so were the paychecks, but and it's a good camera, but that's really only the beginning, and that's what you do with it, but the reason I bought Nikons and never switched to Canon, well, Canon wasn't very good for the longest time, and then they improved it, but I've talked to repairmen who can repair Hasselblads or anything, any kind of camera, and who told me that the Nikon, holds up better than a Canon. It's harder to break than a Canon, And if you're overseas or, you know, in a war or you know, doing interviews in some third world country or where there's no repairs, then that's why you always carry 2 or 3 bodies and one breaks. And but I buy Nikons because they're not going to break as easily. You can drop them and they won't explode. And I know for a lot of people that's it's a problem that, you know, you're starting out, having any money, and the camera body costs $1,000, and then you want a lens. Oh, would you like a lens? And I mean, it's really, I've gotten into these. Panasonic makes this little thing called a Lumix.
I used to have one. They're wonderful cameras.
They're unbelievable. You could work with one of these. And their new one has an eye level viewfinder. It's digital, so it looks like you're looking at a TV screen, just like on the back here. But it has this one is an older one, has an f2 lens, which is, you know, that's the amount of light at the widest that can get in here. And the new one has a 1.4 lens, which, you know, it's with this thing. You know, and she's in the shadows there, and it's oops.
Still looks
But yeah, it still picks up all that light.
light.
Yeah. And but this is, you know, when you're trying to turn it on. When you've got, you know, trying to do this in low light, you're shaking all around, and so but this is such a nice wide angle that I take a lot of pictures on airplanes and things, you know, because this is such a wide angle lens that, you know, I could point this like this, and, you know, I'm getting her too, and which I wish I had one of these years ago. Have you seen one?
I don't think so.
And this one's under $400. Well, it's right at $400. But you could, without I mean, the quality of that thing. A guy named Bruce Dale, who was a geographic photographer, he's my age. I'm 75 now. Oh, Jesus, I thought this would happen. But he's had 2,000 in the geographic.
Oh, wow.
2,000. And he does jobs for Panasonic of testing out their cameras, and he said several years ago, he said, "Have you seen the Panasonic Lumix?" I said, "No, never had a Panasonic." He said, "Well, it's a point and shoot with an f2 lens on it and does things that are unreal." And so I'm anyway, I have a new one, and I don't need it, not out there that much, but I have it with me almost all the time.
I was saying that's really nifty. Like, I saw that you can do manual focus on that.
You can do manual focus, you can do manual exposure, you can shoot raw. I mean, it's got everything.
I would say for just a small little camera like that, it's pretty.
Oh, yeah.
It's nifty.
It really is. And this, they're called Lumix LX3. That's an LX3. There's an LX5. There's an LX. I think the current one is a 7. But so you can pick up one of these for probably $100 less than you can the new one.
Mm-hmm.
And if money's any object at all. What year are you guys?
I'm supposed to be a freshman, but I skipped senior year of high school basically, so I'm a sophomore at KU.
Ah.
So getting right up in like my major and everything. So that's really exciting, like getting into the stuff that I actually want to go into.
Oh yeah, I mean I do have a grandson up here, and